The Expectation Trap. Expect Nothing, Live Everything by Sami Bsoul. Expectation is a quiet architect of our lives. Invisible, persistent, and often unnoticed, it writes scripts we follow without ever reading them. From the moment we learn to hope, we begin to imagine how life should unfold, how people should behave, how events should occur, how the world should respond to our desires. At first, expectation feels natural, even necessary. It gives structure to our days, a rhythm to our plans, a sense of order in a world that can feel chaotic. But beneath this surface comfort lies a hidden cost. Expectation asks for obedience from the world, and when the world refuses even slightly, it creates tension, frustration, and an unspoken unease. It is not only the grand, obvious expectations that shape us. The smallest assumptions, the glance we hope will return, the favor we believe is owed, the recognition we imagine we deserve, carry weight. They accumulate silently, shaping the way we see others, ourselves, and life itself. Over time, they can become invisible prisons, subtle yet relentless, limiting the freedom of thought, feeling, and experience. This book is about expectation in its many forms, how it grows in the mind, how it hides in relationships, how it shapes ambition, love, and self-perception. It is not a guide telling you what to do, nor a lecture about right and wrong. It is a mirror. It reveals the patterns that govern us, the invisible contracts we inherit, create, and carry. By noticing expectation for what it is, persistent, often unconscious, and always demanding, you may begin to see life differently. Not as a series of rules to be followed or debts to be repaid, but as a space where possibility, presence, and choice exist beyond the scripts we have been handed. This is the journey you are about to take, through the quiet power of expectation, the subtle ways it governs your mind and relationships, and the profound freedom that comes when the ledger finally rests. Welcome to the Expectation Trap. Expect nothing, live everything. The world is not obliged to answer your questions, yet you ask them anyway. And sometimes the silence tells you more than any answer ever could. We write contracts with moments that have not yet arrived and sign them in silence. The irony is, the future never reads the fine print. Expecting is the quiet act of borrowing from the future and losing in the present, and interest accrues invisibly, moment by moment. Every glance you anticipate, every word you rehearse, lives first in your ledger, until reality writes its own version, always off script. The weight you feel is often carried not by reality, but by invisible scripts only you can read. And yet, you treat them as though they were carved in stone. Freedom begins the moment the world owes you nothing. Until then, every step forward feels like a debt. Hope wears many masks, expectation wears a leash, and we mistake the leash for the path itself. Even love can demand obedience if we are unaware of the rules we impose. The cruelest captivity is often self-imposed, disguised as devotion. Time never hurries or delays, it simply flows, indifferent to your agenda. Yet we rage against its calm patience as if it were a tyrant. Control is only the mirror of fear dressed as certainty, and the reflection always knows more than we do. The moments we imagine are often heavier than the moments that actually arrive, yet we carry them like luggage that was never ours to hold. Others are never betrayers, they are simply refusing to inhabit the scripts we wrote for them. And our outrage is often the applause we give to our own illusions. Perfectionism is a ledger of the self, tallied in invisible ink, and the mistakes we punish are often figments of our imagination. Expectation is silent, subtle, and persistent. It whispers even when the world is quiet. It speaks the loudest in moments we least notice. The future cannot break you, but the contracts you write with it can. And we are all, secretly, amateur accountants of a ledger that does not exist. Chapter 1. The Silent Author of Disappointment. Disappointment always arrives quietly, like a shadow we didn't invite. It doesn't knock, it doesn't warn, it simply appears. On the night a friend doesn't call, in the silence after an unanswered message, in the pause of an interview that never leads to an offer. It feels personal, almost cruel, as if the universe itself has turned against us. But if you look closely, you'll see disappointment never came from the event itself. It was written long before, in a script you didn't even notice yourself writing. You expected the friend to call, you expected the message to be answered, you expected the door to open because you had already stepped through it in your mind. Disappointment is not born in reality, it is born in expectation. We rarely admit this because it's easier to blame people, to point at circumstances, to call life unfair. But disappointment is a co-author. Reality supplies the event, and expectation supplies the wound. Without expectation, reality is simply what it is. A silence is just silence. A closed door is only a wall with no handle. But with expectation, that silence becomes betrayal, and that closed door becomes rejection. It is astonishing how much of what we call pain comes not from what actually happened, but from what we believed should have happened. There's a strange kind of secret contract we carry inside us. No paper, no ink, yet it governs everything. We write roles for the people we love, the friend who must always understand, the partner who must never forget, the parent who must always support. We even write roles for strangers. The driver should let us pass, the waiter should smile, the world should treat us with fairness. The trouble is, nobody else signed these contracts, and so they break them daily without even knowing. When they do, we call it disappointment. But really, it is the collapse of the fiction we created. They never agreed to play the part, and reality never promised to follow our script. Psychologists have long known that the human brain is a prediction machine. Every moment it projects forward, guessing, anticipating, preparing. This ability kept our ancestors alive. They survived because they expected the rustle in the bushes to be danger, the changing sky to bring rain. But survival became habit, and habit became prison. The same mind that predicted predators now predicts kindness, loyalty, success, and love. And when reality doesn't match the forecast, we suffer. Think back to your greatest heartbreak. Was it truly the loss of the person, or was it the loss of the story you thought you were writing with them? Think of your deepest frustration at work. Was it really the task itself, or the betrayal of the expectation that it would be different, easier, or fairer? Disappointment is a ghost author. It hides in the margins of our days, waiting for reality to betray the story we thought we deserved. But here is the most unsettling truth. If you strip away expectation, disappointment has nothing left to stand on. We expect consistency from people who are inherently changeable, and yet we act surprised every time they evolve. Ambition often wears the mask of expectation. The ladder we climb may be leaning against someone else's wall. We demand understanding from those who can only see their own reflections, and mistake silence for indifference when it is simply perspective. Expectation makes strangers out of lovers and strangers out of friends. We measure connection by compliance, not by presence. The mind rehearses failures more vividly than successes, and expectation turns imagination into indictment. We expect gratitude for acts we imagine as generous, forgetting that kindness is not a currency but a current. Time feels slow when waiting, fast when losing, and expectation is the lens that bends its measure. We expect honesty in forms we can understand, not realizing truth often speaks in dialects unfamiliar to the ego. Love is often a ledger of unspoken debts, and every expectation we attach is interest that grows unseen. The heart can hold more than the mind expects, yet we rarely trust it to surprise us without warning. Expectation can transform patience into punishment. The very thing we wait for may arrive exactly when it is meant to, not when we demand it. We expect clarity in chaos, order in entropy, and call life cruel when it does not comply. We project certainty onto the uncertain, and then feel betrayed when the unknown refuses to yield. Every should we carry is a shadow of someone else's voice, and we call it judgment when it is really inheritance. We expect the world to validate our vision of ourselves. forgetting that the world has its own story to tell, indifferent to ours. Chapter 2: Inherited Scripts. Before we could speak, before we could even think in words of our own, a story was being written for us. It began in whispers and glances, the weight of a mother's sigh when we failed to reach perfection, the quiet pride when we performed exactly as expected. Every family has its own rhythm of expectation, a secret language of shoulds and musts that we learn before we can name them. Culture joined in next, shaping us with invisible hands. The lessons weren't always spoken, yet they were unavoidable. How to behave, how to achieve, how to measure our worth. Our victories were praised only if they fit the story. Our failures were magnified if they strayed from it. And so we inherited a script we never chose. We act it out every day, sometimes without realizing it. The decisions we make, the paths we follow, the very dreams we think are ours, many of them are echoes of a narrative written before we even had a voice. Psychologists call this internalized expectation, but it is more than theory, it is architecture. It builds the rooms we live in, the ceilings we cannot see, the floors that sometimes give way beneath our feet. Consider a child who grows up hearing, "Be perfect or you are nothing." By the time they are 20, 30, 40, they are performing for a silent audience that no longer exists. They chase jobs, relationships, even smiles, for approval that has long vanished. Yet the script lives on inside them, and every deviation feels like betrayal. Society adds layers: gender, class, religion, nationality. Each one writes lines we memorize unconsciously. Even rebellion, the act we often think is free, can be traced to this inheritance, a script we inherited and now refuse to play, but still we cannot escape the echo of it. We inherit not only expectation, but the invisible pain of unmet expectation. We carry the ghosts of countless voices saying, "This is what you must be, this is what we need you to be, this is what is right." And we obey them because the alternative, listening only to the voice within, is terrifyingly unknown. Yet these scripts are not always cruel. Some guide, some protect, some teach us what it means to belong. But even the kindest scripts can cage us if we do not recognize them for what they are: stories written by others, not ourselves. To live fully, one must first see the architecture of these scripts, the invisible lines that curve through every choice, every desire, every sense of disappointment. Once seen, we may begin to notice which stories we inherited, which stories we performed, and which we are finally ready to read with eyes wide open. Because until we recognize the scripts we never wrote, every expectation, our own and others, is another invisible chain. We expect certainty in a world made for uncertainty, and mistake prediction for mastery, forgetting that surprise is inevitable. Control is the shadow we cast over life's chaos, and every tug we make bends only the illusion, never reality. We expect forgiveness from those we refuse to forgive ourselves, and call it mercy when it finally arrives externally. The future is never late. Expectation is always impatient. Its clock ticks only in the mind. We anticipate closure before understanding has arrived, and miss the lessons hidden in the lingering uncertainty. Our expectations are often echoes of our fears, whispering, warning us of things that may never exist. We expect kindness in forms that suit our ego, and overlook the generosity that arrives disguised as indifference. Perception becomes a ledger when expectation tallies each moment. Even beauty is measured, even joy accounted for. We demand presence from those who are already present, forgetting that awareness is not always obvious. Expectation makes strangers of familiar places. The same street, the same room, never quite meets the imagination. We imagine life as a narrative with predictable acts, and call chaos betrayal when the plot diverges. Every "I hoped" is a story written in invisible ink, and sometimes it never needs to be read. We expect gratitude for silent sacrifices, not realizing some gifts exist only to transform the giver. The mind confuses arrival with fulfillment, and the journey often teaches more than the destination. Expectation whispers louder than reality ever could, and yet silence sometimes speaks the truest answer. Chapter 3: The Invisible Ledger of Love. Love is said to be the most generous of all human experiences, yet it often carries a secret weight, invisible but relentless. From the very first "I love you," a ledger begins to write itself, not in ink, but in expectation. Every act, every word, every glance is quietly tallied. Did you remember my birthday? Did you call when you said you would? Did you understand me when I spoke without words? The ledger grows silently, and neither party ever truly sees it. We walk through life believing that love is pure, spontaneous, infinite. And yet, much of what we call love is actually expectation wearing a mask. We expect presence, loyalty, attention, reassurance. We expect understanding without explanation. We expect consistency, even when life itself is unpredictable. Think of the parent who gives endlessly, yet bristles when the child does not meet an unspoken standard. Think of the friend who stands by in appearance, yet expects loyalty measured in hours and favors. Think of lovers whose passion wanes the moment the other fails to fulfill a silent promise written only in memory. This invisible ledger is cunning. It disguises itself as care, devotion, or duty, but its true nature is revealed not in kindness, but in disappointment. Every "I thought you would" is a quiet accusation, a subtraction from an invisible account that no one agreed to maintain. Psychologists have observed this in every corner of human intimacy. We internalize social scripts of reciprocity and fairness, and we overlay them on love, assuming that affection comes with balance sheets. But love is not arithmetic. It cannot be measured in points, in debts repaid, or in hours accounted for. And yet we try every day. The tragedy is subtle and often unnoticed. Two people can love each other deeply and still be held hostage, bound by the unseen calculations of what is owed, what is deserved, what has been forgotten. The ledger never sleeps. Its penalties are silent: resentment, irritation, the shrinking of joy into expectation. Yet in this ledger lies a hidden truth. Love, even under the weight of expectation, mirrors exactly the patterns we have inherited. We carry the scripts of our parents, our culture, our earliest lessons in care. We repeat the balances and deficits we watched unfold before we could speak. Every expectation of love is a line item in a story that began long before we knew our own names. And so, love becomes both gift and trap, a tender, invisible account book we maintain without notice, signing every page with our unspoken shoulds. The more we count, the more we feel owed. The more we feel owed, the more we feel disappointed. We expect consistency in a world that thrives on change, and call it betrayal when life refuses to repeat itself. Expectation turns small moments into monumental debts. Even a smile becomes a ledger of imagined obligations. We expect understanding from those who can only see themselves, and feel unheard, not realizing the echo was always ours. Every time we expect love to arrive perfectly, we overlook the ways it already exists: subtle, imperfect, quietly persistent. Expectation whispers that the future should obey our timeline, and we forget that time answers to no one. We expect perfection in ourselves, and disappointment is the inevitable response. The ledger always tallies more than the heart can carry. Expectation makes strangers of the familiar. We see people as roles instead of as they truly are. We expect gratitude for kindness given freely, and overlook the silent ripple that continues without recognition. Expectation grows fastest in the gaps between what is and what we imagine, and feeds quietly on impatience. We expect clarity in life's ambiguity, yet mystery is the only guarantee. Expectation disguises itself as hope, and hope becomes a trap. We call the whisper of desire by another name. We expect others to reflect our inner rules, and call it betrayal when they choose their own path. Expectation is the quiet weight carried in silence, and often we blame the world for its pressure. We expect outcomes without acknowledging the process. The ledger tallies events, not growth. Expectation rarely speaks, it only whispers. Yet its silence can fill a lifetime with tension. Chapter 4: The Weight of Self. The heaviest expectations are carried not by society, not by family, not even by lovers, but by the mirror. From the moment we first see our reflection, a silent ledger begins to tally the self we think we must become. Perfection, achievement, identity, they are all drafts we write on the surface of our own skin, expecting our reflection to approve, to applaud, to recognize us as enough. We chase accomplishments not because we desire them, but because the inner audience, the one behind the eyes in the mirror, waits with judgment. Each failure is a subtraction, each misstep a mark against our unseen account. We strive, we hustle, we perform, all in service of a self that may never exist outside the ledger we've created. Psychologists call it internalized self-expectation, but this phrase barely scratches the surface. It is more than thought, it is architecture. It builds hallways lined with shame, ceilings of fear, floors that tremble beneath the weight of ambition. It is the silent pressure that whispers, you should be more, you should achieve, you should know, you should feel differently. Perfectionism is the sharpest blade in this architecture. It cuts not outward but inward, shaping every thought, every decision, every dream. And ambition, that celebrated virtue, is often nothing more than a masquerade, an attempt to meet the impossible standards we have inscribed for ourselves. Even our identity is borrowed from the mirror. The self we present is carefully curated, often more a reflection of expectation than of essence. And yet, the cruelest part is how invisible this weight is. We rarely notice it. We call it drive, dedication, discipline. We celebrate the achievements born from it, rarely recognizing the exhaustion, the doubt, the constant fear of falling short. Disappointment here has no other source than ourselves. It is the collapse of the story we wrote about who we must be. When we fail our own vision, when the reflection frowns back at us, we feel betrayal. No friend, no lover, no society has acted. The wound comes entirely from the unyielding self. To see this is to recognize a paradox. The self we think we must please is the one we fear most. Its judgment is relentless, its contracts silent, and its demands eternal. And still we obey. Yet in the folds of this weight lies something almost imperceptible, a quiet awareness that the mirror, the ledger, the architect of our own expectation is itself made of the same silent contracts we inherited, the same scripts we absorbed before we even had a voice. Every disappointment, every ache, every fleeting triumph is a conversation with ourselves, a dialogue written in invisible ink and read only in the quiet moments when we pause before the mirror. We expect life to reward effort in neat packages and call it unfair when the world delivers in fragments. Expectation is the shadow of desire, quietly shaping every choice. Even moments we cherish are filtered through it. We expect consistency from hearts that are constantly evolving and mistake change for betrayal. Expectation turns fleeting moments into forever judgments. Every glance, every word, quietly recorded. We expect clarity where only ambiguity exists, and spend years searching for lines that were never drawn. Expectation makes the invisible visible. We see debts and obligations in kindness, love, and silence. We expect validation from others for feelings already ours to own, and call it cruelty when it is simply absent. Expectation is patient yet relentless. It waits quietly for reality to conform and resents it when it does not. We expect time to bend according to our wishes and feel rushed, yet everything arrives at its own pace. Expectation can turn freedom into pressure. We hold the world hostage without knowing it. We expect gratitude from those who cannot see our ledger and call it ingratitude when they live beyond our tally. Expectation is often louder than action, and its whispers echo in the moments we cannot control. We expect perfection in outcomes we cannot fully shape and punish ourselves for the world's unpredictability. Expectation creates stories before the first page is written. and we live the script we imagined, not the life we were given. We expect others to fit our version of reality and forget that each mind writes its own invisible script. Chapter 5: The Illusion of Fairness. We enter the world as if it owes us something, not wealth, not love, not even understanding, but fairness. A quiet assumption takes root. If I am good, if I try, if I honor life's invisible rules, life will honor me in return. And then reality arrives, unapologetic and indifferent. The friend betrays trust, the partner falters, the opportunity slips away, and in that moment we feel wronged, as if the universe has failed to keep its promise. Yet the universe never made a promise. It is we who wrote one in the invisible ink of expectation. Every grievance, every shock, every ache of perceived injustice is authored by us long before life delivers its unpredictable truths. Psychologists note that humans are remarkably sensitive to fairness. We crave it, measure it, demand it, even from forces that are neither sentient nor moral. The illusion takes many forms. Why should they succeed while I struggle? Why should kindness go unrewarded? Why must I pay the price for a world that seems indifferent? Every sense of outrage, every pang of resentment is a ledger entry. Life owes, I am owed, injustice reigns. Yet the ledger exists only in our minds. Without the expectation of balance, there is no injustice, only reality in its raw, indifferent form. Consider the child who watches a sibling praised for a trivial achievement while their own efforts go unnoticed. The pain is real, the jealousy sharp, but it exists only because the child assumed life would be proportional, fair, rational. The assumption, not the event, is the architect of sorrow. We carry this illusion into adulthood. Careers, relationships, recognition, all measured against an invisible scale that rarely exists. We are shocked when the weight tips unexpectedly, offended by life's apparent partiality, and still we cling to the belief that fairness is possible, as if reality should honor our calculations. It is here, in this silent expectation, that resentment festers. Heartbreak blooms, not necessarily from what happened, but from what we assumed should have happened. Every disappointment in fairness is a mirror, reflecting back the scripts we inherited, the contracts we never read, the assumptions we made in the dark. Yet recognition can be strange and liberating. To see that fairness is an invention of our minds, not a law of the cosmos. Once this is felt, life is no longer measured in balances, debts, and rewards. The ledger collapses, and in the emptiness of expectation, a strange clarity emerges. The world is indifferent. It is chaotic, beautiful, unpredictable. And in this indifference lies a truth few notice. Without expectation of fairness, heartbreak is no longer a verdict. It is merely a passing shadow across the face of reality. We expect the world to follow our plans, yet it writes its own story, and we are left reading between lines we never wrote. Expectation often lives in the space between desire and reality. It measures, judges, and quietly reshapes every experience. We expect patience to feel easy, yet it is a practice forged in discomfort. And expectation itself is the hardest teacher. Expectation is the echo of what we imagine should be, and often drowns out what actually is. We expect love to arrive as we picture it, and overlook the forms it chooses to take. Expectation can make even abundance feel like lack. We tally what is missing while ignoring what is present. We expect understanding from others before understanding ourselves, and call it failure when they cannot read our minds. Expectation thrives on certainty and punishes ambiguity. Yet life is neither certain nor accountable. We expect recognition for silent struggles and feel unseen, not realizing the world owes no acknowledgement. Expectation can turn simple moments into monumental tests. Even laughter is weighed and measured in anticipation. We expect clarity in paths we have yet to walk, and stumble when life refuses to draw maps in advance. Expectation often disguises itself as hope. Its gentle whisper can be heavier than any loud command. We expect reality to bend around our imagination and call it injustice when it refuses. Expectation creates invisible fences around freedom, and we walk them without ever noticing. We expect outcomes, not experiences, and miss the richness that exists between before and after. Chapter 6, The Myth of Control. We like to believe we hold the reins of life, that if we plan carefully, act diligently, and steer decisively, the world will obey us. But control, like a magician's trick, is more illusion than substance. Expecting outcomes as if reality must bend to our designs is one of the most subtle forms of suffering. We map the future, anticipate responses, rehearse conversations, and draft contingencies, all while ignoring a simple truth. Life has never promised compliance. Control is a mask. Behind it lurks fear, the fear of uncertainty, of failure, of the unknown. We dress it in certainty, schedules, plans, predictions. We convince ourselves that mastery is possible, that outcomes can be tamed, yet the universe resists being tamed, indifferent to our strategies, silent in its unpredictability. Consider the parent arranging a child's future with meticulous care, only to see unforeseen events rewrite every expectation. Consider the worker who charts every career step, only to watch sudden layoffs, changing markets, and accidents upend the plan. Consider the lover who believes devotion guarantees reciprocity, only to be confronted with betrayal or indifference. Each shock is a reminder that control is a story we tell ourselves, a ledger of imagined influence that dissolves upon inspection. And still, we cling to it, mistaking planning for power, persistence for certainty. Psychologists have long observed this. The more we attempt to control, the more anxiety we invite. The mind's obsession with predictable outcomes breeds rigidity, frustration, and disappointment. Ironically, the act meant to secure us often imprisons us. Control is also seductive because it disguises itself as responsibility. We like to believe that when things go wrong, we or those around us failed to act properly. But reality rarely follows our ledger. It does not tally effort or measure intention. It simply is. The moment we sense this, the myth begins to crumble, not through denial of ambition, but through recognition. Life is not a machine to be operated, it is a river to be observed. Its currents are unpredictable, its depths unknown, its course indifferent. To expect it to obey is to contract disappointment before the first ripple appears. And yet, most of us never see the illusion. We mistake fear for foresight, pressure for prudence, and expectation for authority over events. We submit to the myth daily, silently scripting reality to conform to imagined control. Control is only ever a face of fear dressed in certainty, a shadow we pursue, believing it is light. And every expectation we attach to it is a seed of disappointment waiting to sprout. We expect answers before the questions have even formed, and call it frustration when clarity waits. Expectation turns every pause into a test. Even silence becomes heavy with imagined meaning. We expect gestures to speak our language and miss the conversation happening beyond our script. Expectation shapes the way we see ordinary moments and magnifies small absences into great losses. We expect people to carry the weight we cannot put down ourselves and call it betrayal when they refuse the burden. Expectation often hides inside the familiar. The ones we know best can surprise us most. We expect patience to come naturally, yet it is a muscle rarely exercised. And expectation itself is often the resistance. Expectation is the quiet ledger we consult constantly, and its balance is never what we hope to see. We expect joy to arrive packaged neatly and overlook the subtle forms it takes when unwrapped slowly. Expectation can make even love feel conditional. We measure devotion instead of feeling it. We expect the world to justify our perspective and forget that it moves according to its own logic. Expectation often whispers louder than reality ever shouts, and we mistake its echo for truth. We expect endings before beginnings have fully arrived and miss the richness of the unfolding moment. Expectation can turn ordinary kindness into currency. We tally gestures instead of experiencing them. We expect to control what cannot be held and call it failure when life slips through our fingers. Chapter 7. Time as the enemy. Time is the quietest accomplice of expectation. It ticks away, impartial, indifferent, while we measure life against its invisible ruler, when things should happen, how long they should last, what the pace of our achievements ought to be. From childhood, we are taught to mark milestones: first steps, first words, first grades. Later come graduations, promotions, marriages, and anniversaries. Each moment carries the silent weight of timing. We learn to expect that life will follow this schedule, that progress will unfold like clockwork, that happiness has an expiration date or a proper season, and then time moves, always, unyielding, uncaring. A friendship fades before we expected it. A love lingers longer than we thought it would, neither blooming nor dying, suspended in quiet frustration. A dream takes years to appear, or never appears at all. Time does not break rules, it simply ignores them, and our disappointment is born not from the delay or the loss itself, but from the contract we wrote with time in our minds. Psychologists note that humans are notoriously impatient. The brain predicts outcomes and wants them realized within calculated windows. When the world fails to comply, our inner ledger notes the deficit, and heartbreak arrives as if it were owed. Yet the fault lies not in chronology, but in the expectation we silently impose upon it. Even the smallest measure of time carries betrayal. A message left unread for hours feels like abandonment. A glance delayed by a second feels like indifference. A promise postponed becomes proof of failure. We have trained ourselves to bind emotion to the movement of seconds, to the invisible hands of a clock. Time is enemy only because we ask it to serve us. We attempt to shape it, predict it, demand it to align with our desires, but time obeys no one. It moves on, indifferent, impartial, neither cruel nor kind. Our suffering is its echo, our disappointment the reflection of our scripts, not its action. And yet, time is relentless, teaching its lessons quietly. We can choose to notice it, to watch its currents, to feel its inevitability, but we cannot rewrite its course. Every expectation we place upon it is a seed of inevitable frustration. Every imagined timetable, a contract with a force that refuses to sign. Time betrays only those who believe it owes them understanding, speed, or justice. And in this betrayal lies a subtle, undeniable truth. Life unfolds according to its own rhythm, and every expectation we tie to its ticking is another shadow of disappointment waiting to fall. We expect certainty in a world that thrives on unpredictability, and call it chaos when life refuses to comply. Expectation often turns possibility into pressure. Even a blank page can feel like a test. We expect others to behave as if they know our inner scripts, and wonder why they never follow the invisible instructions. Expectation is a mirror of our own desires, and reflects not the world, but the stories we tell ourselves. We expect recognition for efforts the world never promised to notice, and call it injustice when it remains unseen. Expectation is patient, relentless, and invisible. It grows quietly until it shapes every thought and glance. We expect love to arrive in perfect timing, and overlook the imperfect, unpredictable ways it shows up. Expectation makes absence feel heavier than presence. We measure what is missing instead of noticing what is here. We expect outcomes before we embrace the process, and mistake impatience for failure. Expectation can make freedom feel like burden. We cage ourselves without realizing it. We expect others to validate feelings we cannot validate ourselves, and call it rejection when they remain neutral. Expectation turns small gestures into debts owed. Even a smile becomes a tally on an invisible ledger. We expect time to honor our agendas, yet life flows according to its own rhythm. Expectation disguises itself as hope, ambition, and love, and we rarely see the leash until it tightens. We expect clarity in chaos and certainty in change, and wonder why life never follows our script. Chapter 8: The Betrayal of Others. Betrayal is rarely what it seems. We name it with fury, with heartbreak, with disbelief, yet most betrayals are nothing more than others refusing to play the roles we assign them in our private scripts. From childhood, we inherit the notion of loyalty. We learn to expect it from parents, friends, siblings, and later from lovers, colleagues, mentors. But loyalty, as we imagine it, is often a shadow cast by our expectations. We confuse obedience with devotion, compliance with care, presence with love. When someone does not act as we imagined, disappointment blooms. We call it treachery, yet the fault lies not in their choices, but in the unspoken contracts we wrote without consent. We expected them to fulfill a role scripted by our imagination, not by reality. Consider the friend who drifts away without explanation, the partner who refuses to follow our silent rules, the sibling who chooses differently than we assumed they would. Each choice feels like a wound because we believed life owed us compliance, yet the wound exists only in the ledger of expectation we maintain. Psychologists have observed this tendency repeatedly. Humans create mental narratives for those around them, often unconsciously. Every relationship carries a hidden map of how things should be, and every deviation from it is felt as betrayal. The irony is exquisite. We love others not always for who they are, but for the scripts we hope they will play. The deeper truth is unsettling. People are not our actors, nor our mirrors, nor our guarantors of fulfillment. When we expect them to perform according to the lines we wrote, we mistake their autonomy for cruelty. The so-called betrayal is merely their refusal or inability to live inside our private story. And yet, these perceived betrayals teach something essential: that expectation is a silent jailer. The chains are invisible, the locks imperceptible, and the keys we imagine we lost were never in our possession, they were in the minds of those we sought to control. To notice this is both devastating and liberating. Devastating because it illuminates how much suffering we have authored ourselves. Liberating because once we see the ledger for what it is, once we recognize the scripts we imposed on others, the betrayal dissolves, leaving only the raw, unadorned reality of human choice. We do not betray each other, we betray the stories we wrote and demanded others inhabit. And that revelation, sharp and quiet, can shift the weight of disappointment into something lighter, something we finally understand, even if we cannot change it. We expect clarity where only questions exist, and call it confusion when the answers are delayed. Expectation often builds invisible walls around the present, and we fail to notice the view beyond them. We expect others to carry the weight of our imagined burdens, and call it betrayal when they set them down. Expectation whispers that life should obey our will, and every deviation becomes a personal affront. We expect love to mirror our own needs perfectly, and forget it arrives with its own shape and rhythm. Expectation turns waiting into suffering. Even moments of stillness become heavy with imagined outcomes. We expect patience to feel easy, and overlook the quiet struggle it demands. Expectation measures the present against an imagined past or future, and the present almost never measures up. We expect people to read invisible maps and wonder why they always take different routes. Expectation can make ordinary moments feel monumental, every glance, word, and gesture tallied in silence. We expect gratitude for acts done without expectation, and call it ingratitude when it is absent. Expectation creates tension where none exists. The mind builds fences around open fields. We expect time to reward effort evenly, and call it injustice when life moves unevenly. Expectation disguises itself as hope, security, and love, and rarely admits its true name. We expect reality to confirm our imagination, and feel surprised when it writes its own story. Chapter 9: The Sweet Poison of Hope. Hope is often dressed in light. We admire it, we nurture it, we call it life-affirming. Yet beneath its brightness lies a secret weight, a subtle toxin, expectation disguised as possibility. We imagine the future as a canvas that will unfold according to our vision. We dream, and the dream becomes a silent demand. The promotion we hope for, the love we wish to receive, the success we long to claim, each carries an unspoken contract. The world should deliver what we foresee. And when it does not, heartbreak follows, not because the dream failed, but because expectation poisoned it from the start. Hope is not innocent, it is seductive, it whispers, it could happen, it should happen, it must happen. We chase it, clutch it, let it guide us, unaware that it binds us in chains of anticipation. Psychologists note that humans are wired to project into the future. We simulate outcomes, rehearse victories, and imagine fulfillment long before it arrives. This ability sustains us, inspires action, but it also leaves us vulnerable. Every imagined future carries a ledger of debts. The world owes us, the people owe us, life owes us. And when reality does not comply, the ledger is marked with disappointment. Even small hopes can carry the poison. The glance we hope will be returned, the message we expect to be answered, the small kindness we anticipate. Each can wound when expectation sneaks in disguised as hope. The thin line between dreaming and demanding is nearly invisible, yet every step across it writes another entry in the ledger of suffering. Consider the lover who waits for a call that never comes, the artist who imagines acclaim before the first brushstroke dries, the child who hopes for recognition that may never arrive. Each is caught in hope's quiet trap, breaking long before the future itself unfolds. And yet, hope is irresistible. We cannot abandon it because it carries the promise of possibility, the vision of better, the spark that moves us forward. Its poison is subtle, almost invisible. It makes the future a judge, not a mystery, a debt, not an unfolding, a mirror for expectation, not a window for wonder. The paradox is exquisite. The same force that inspires us also wounds us. The same dream that lifts us can weigh us down. And the only way to glimpse its truth is to feel it, to notice the ledger it creates, and to observe the thin, trembling line between dreaming and demanding. We expect others to honor rules we never wrote aloud, and feel betrayed when they refuse to read our minds. Expectation makes ordinary moments feel like obligations. Even laughter and silence can carry weight. We expect certainty in a world that speaks in uncertainty, and call it chaos when outcomes surprise us. Expectation often hides in the spaces between words. It fills pauses, gestures, and glances with invisible meaning. We expect perfection in ourselves, and disappointment follows naturally. The ledger never balances, and the heart quietly tallies. Expectation transforms patience into a test of endurance. Waiting becomes a mirror of desire, not reality. We expect clarity where only ambiguity exists, and struggle to read the messages life writes in uncertainty. Expectation grows fastest in the mind, slowest in reality. The gap between them is where tension resides. We expect gratitude from those unaware of our ledger, and call it ingratitude when it is simply absent. Expectation often disguises itself as hope, ambition, or love. Its leash is hidden, even when tightly wound. We expect others to fit our imagined narratives, and call it betrayal when they improvise their own stories. Expectation makes even freedom feel like a burden. We cage ourselves with invisible bars. We expect the world to follow our timeline, and call it unfair when it moves at its own pace. Expectation whispers louder than reality ever shouts. Its echo lingers in the spaces between events. We expect outcomes without experiencing the process, and miss the subtle lessons hidden in the unfolding. Chapter 10. The Book Without a Script. Imagine a life unwritten, no ledger, no invisible contracts, no scripts etched in secret ink before you even learn to speak. The pages are blank, yet somehow full. The weight of expectation has lifted, not because the world has changed, but because the quiet author within has paused. Freedom does not arrive with control, nor with mastery, nor with the perfection of timing. It arrives in the gentle release of the story we thought we must live. The contracts, once invisible, begin to dissolve, not with force, but with recognition. The ledger of disappointment, the tally of imagined debts, the invisible expectations of family, culture, lovers, and self, each fades into background noise. Psychologists call it self-distancing, the act of observing life rather than scripting it. But here it feels less like theory and more like a landscape seen for the first time. The world does not owe you meaning. People do not owe you compliance. Time does not owe you justice. And yet, in letting go of this silent demand, something extraordinary emerges: clarity, presence, and the faint tremor of possibility. Life without a script is paradoxical. It is neither chaotic nor empty. It is alive, raw, and unpredictable. Moments arrive without accounting. Love is offered without a ledger. Success unfolds without guarantee. The absence of expectation does not diminish experience, it deepens it. The quiet tension of what should happen evaporates, leaving only what is. And what is remains astonishing. The sunlight does not owe warmth, yet it warms. The rain does not owe sustenance, yet it nourishes. A smile does not owe recognition, yet it is felt. Each event, unmeasured and unjudged, becomes full in itself. The book without a script is not an instruction. It does not tell you to release, to forgive, to detach. It paints an image: a river flowing unimpeded, a leaf drifting on its own course, a breath taken without expectation. And in this image, the reader sees not a command, but possibility, the strange, quiet liberation of living untethered. Expectation is the silent author of disappointment, the invisible script of our inherited, projected, and self-imposed demands. But here, on these final pages, the pen rests. The story is not written, the ledger is empty. And in the stillness of that unwritten life, freedom begins, not as achievement, not as conquest, but as a subtle recognition. The world owes nothing, and yet it is full beyond measure. Final words: expectation is the quiet architect of our lives. It drafts scripts we never read, writes ledgers we never signed, and imposes rules we never agreed upon, but we live them anyway. It whispers in the spaces between words, measures moments we barely notice, and tallies gestures that were never meant to carry weight. It is patient, subtle, relentless, and often invisible. For much of life, we mistake its whispers for truth. We expect clarity in chaos, loyalty in others, perfection in ourselves, and justice in the world. We measure people by the roles we assign them silently. We measure love, success, and even time by invisible rulers that bend only in our imagination. And when the world refuses to obey, we call it failure, betrayal, or loss. Yet when we notice expectation for what it is, something extraordinary begins to happen. The ledger becomes empty, not because the world has changed, but because our eyes have. The contracts we carried quietly dissolve. The weight that pressed on our hearts is revealed as paper thin. We see life not as a series of debts and obligations, but as a vast, uncharted space, unwritten, uncalculated, untamed. In that space, time is no longer an enemy. It flows, indifferent and generous. People are no longer bound by the roles we designed for them. They are free, as are we. Love arrives in forms we cannot predict. Gestures of grace appear where we expected none, and moments of joy arrive quietly, unannounced, yet perfectly placed. Freedom, it turns out, is not something to grasp or demand. It is the absence of expectation. It is the quiet realization that life owes nothing, and that in this emptiness, everything becomes possible. The moments we once measured and feared now breathe. The future we once borrowed from no longer controls the present, and the self, once weighed down by perfection, judgment, and imagined rules, finally exhales. Expectation, we realize, was never a trap built by the world, it was a trap we built for ourselves. The true liberation comes not in controlling life, not in rewriting the world, but in releasing the unseen contracts we carry. Life does not owe us a story, yet it gives us one anyway, in fragments, surprises, laughter, and tears. And in those pieces, life speaks a language more profound than any expectation could script. Expect nothing. Watch, listen, and live. Let the ledger rest. Let the whispers quiet. Let the world unfold, unbound and unmeasured. In this space, life begins to speak in its own voice, And if we are still enough to hear it, we discover that everything we hoped for, without ever knowing it, was already here. The trap is gone, the world remains as it is, and we, finally, are free to witness it.